Hey guys, Gerard Harron back with you again. This week I'm telling you my 7 favorite shows in the 1990s. If you know anything about me, you know that I love 2 things, cheesesteak and nostalgia. And this week we're talking about the greatest decade ever, the 1990s, baby. Bright colors, crazy ads. It was a beautiful time when all content wasn't really marketing disguising itself as content. It was beautiful, it was fun, it was righteous, it was tubular. And now, we're gonna get into my 7 favorite shows from the 1990s. The heyday.
Because you've been running through my mind all day?
All right, number 7, one of the most underrated shows of all time. Before Ellen had the Game of Games, which I love, by the way, there was a little show called Double Dare, which is a way cooler title than Do Dumb for Money on TV. For those of you that don't know what Double Dare was, it was a game show where people would actually dare you to get totally and completely embarrassed, cover yourself in slime, take a pie to the face, punch your mother in her ovary for $25 in fame on a fledgling channel called Nickelodeon. Nobody really punched their mother in the ovary. I'm trying to make a point. It's called hyperbole. And the craziest part about Double Dare is that the host, Mark Summers, who ended up having a great career on the Food Network of all places, had OCD. Can you imagine how bad this guy wanted to make it in Hollywood? That he was a neat freak and he had OCD, and this whole game was about smashing stuff and throwing green slime everywhere and ectoplasm and all this other stuff. Good on you, Mark Summers. I love Double Dare. The number 6 best show of the 90s went back and forth between being a campy comedy and an actual heartfelt drama, and that is the one, the only, Fresh Prince of BelAir. The greatest opening title sequence in history. You know it, sing along with me. In West Philadelphia, born and raised on a playground is where I spent most of my days. Chilling out, maxing, relaxing, all cool and all, shooting some b-ball outside of the school. Well, a couple of guys who were up to no good started making trouble in my neighborhood. I got one little fight. My mom got scared. She said, "You moving with your auntie and uncle about it?" Anyway, you know how it goes, because it's the greatest opening sequence in the history of television. The only thing that even comes close is dum 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 dum. And if you don't know what that is, get off my channel. Seriously, get off my channel right now. One of the great things about the Fresh Prince of BelAir is that this was the 90s. This was a time when they were just up in the air, everything's great, don't do drugs, bright colors, black people, white people, we're all good, America, woo, we beat the USSR. Don't matter if you're black or white. And they actually had the wherewithal, even though they were a comedy and they were a family show, to hit on some pretty hard subjects. Who can ever forget the scene that actually made Will Smith the star? How come my dad don't want me, man?
How come he don't want me, man?
Uncle Phil. Rest in peace, Uncle Phil. What a great show. I love the Fresh Prince of BelAir. And Jazzy Jeff, you're cool in my book too, man. Number 5 is gonna be a little controversial, but I don't care. It's my list, and I'm making it. And number 5 for me is one of the most underrated shows of all time, even though I think it has the most Emmys out of any sitcom of all time, and that is Frasier. Dr. Frasier Crane out there in Seattle. You gotta understand, this is a dude that made opera cool. This is a dude that made crazy bohemian yuppie lifestyle actually interesting on a week in and week out basis. The father, awesome character. Oh geez, bad drinking his Valentine's. That reminded me of my father. Niles, the totally gay but not gay brother because it was the 90s and he weren't allowed to be gay yet because Ellen didn't really come out yet, but it was cool, man. He's going after Daphne. She's from Britain. They had a dog, Frasier. He was crazy outside in real life. He was doing and he had like 5 wives. He was doing crazy stuff, and then he comes in and he's this doctor because it's called acting. I loved it. You got to take Frasier as a whole. It's an unbelievable show. You had Roz, you had Mad Dog, you had unbelievable recurring characters. Frasier, I don't care what anybody says. I will watch you on WPIX and Ion TV every time you're on. Now, in the 90s, Nickelodeon, MTV, they were actually good. They were actually watchable. I know you're looking at me, and I'm going to catch it in the comments. Oh, you're always hating on millennials. It's not millennials. It's Gen Z. Blah, 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 blah. Making up arbitrary terms because you can't deal with what you actually are. But believe me, today's television on Nickelodeon stinks. It just does. It is what it is. You want to watch good television? You know what's a great show today? I'm going to give you a great show. And it's called Teen Titans Go. It's the best writing on all of television. So I'm not ripping on everything today. I am ripping on those 2 channels because they didn't always suck, which they do now. And if you don't believe me, deal with it because you're wrong. Number 4, best show of the 90s is... Some of you are going to argue that this is really an early 2000s show, but it debuted in 98, and I remember I used to sprint off the school bus to get home, and I wanted to see, was it going to be Killer Bees that was number 1? Was it going to be Korn? Was it going to be Limp Bizkit? Was it going to be Britney Spears? Whoever it was, I needed to know. So my number 5 show is Carson Daly's flagship on MTV, back before MTV was just completely terrible. And let's be honest, MTV, you got to get it together, man. You guys are terrible these days. But 18, 19, 20 years ago, you were awesome when you had shows like Total Request Live. TRL! TRL was more than a show, it was a movement. That was the first show I actually actively tried to call in and make my request. TRL, that was what's up, man. TRL was always awesome. And sidebar, I even liked it better. I don't know if you guys remember this, but before TRL, there was a show called Singled Out, which had Jenny McCarthy and it had Carmen Electra, and this is before internet porn existed. That was all a young growing boy needed, to be honest with you. All I know is this: whether you liked the show, you didn't like the show, whether you liked the format or you didn't like the format, back when there was AIM, we used to all sprint to our houses off the school bus to watch TRL so we can argue with each other on AIM about who was 1 through 10. That's a powerful show. I loved Total Request Live. Number 3, more controversy. If you don't like this show, I don't know if we can actually be friends. My number 3 is Animaniacs. Animaniacs was one of the greatest shows of all time. First of all, let's just run through real quick how awesome the 90s were for animation. I could have put any one of these in there. I could have put the Rugrats, I could have put Doug, I could have put Daria, I could have put Beavis and Butthead was awesome. All incredible. Pinky and the Brain. What are we gonna do today, Pinky? We're gonna take over the world. It's amazing. It was an unbelievable time. I didn't really like Ren and Stimpy so much. I didn't like Cat Dog. I did like Rocko's Modern Life. What an incredible time for animation. And the best of them all, my friends, was a little show called Animaniacs. My number 3 favorite show of the 1990s. Now, number 2 and number 1, it's really interesting because the number 2 show, many could argue, is a knockoff of number 1. My number 2 show of the 90s is Martin. Martin Lawrence, one of the favorite shows of all time. Now, I also liked In Living Color, but I'm not really putting sketch shows into this. In Living Color was sick. Saturday Night Live, I consider that more heyday in the 80s, early 90s. Martin was unbelievably funny, and it was carried by none other than the title character, Martin Lawrence. The only reason Martin is not number 1 in my book is because it's too much of a knockoff of the number 1, which is Seinfeld. Seinfeld is the best show of the 90s. If you disagree with me, I will throw up hands. If you think Friends, I actually don't even think Friends was that good, be honest with you. Oh, I'm making out with you. Oh, I'm making out with you. Oh, we're so rich and we can afford these unbelievable apartments for no reason. I hate Friends. I think Friends is terrible. And if you like Friends, I think you have terrible taste. I think Friends had funny moments. I think Chandler was okay. I think all these guys were all right. I think Ross was terrible. I think Jennifer Aniston is overrated. Courtney Cox was always hotter, okay? I'll go to my grave thinking that. But I gotta tell you, Seinfeld is just as good as it gets. The writing was amazing. It somehow has aged better now that we know that George is really Larry David. If you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm and you go back and you watch Seinfeld, it makes it even better. The only knock, and there's only one, is that Seinfeld doesn't translate today because 99% of their plot lines can be solved with a cell phone. Hey, gonna be late. That's it. You know, hey, don't worry about the marble rye. I already delivered it. Amazon on the way. Seinfeld doesn't work today. I know there's some cool things on the internet where people write Seinfeld scripts for today. It's just such an unbelievable dynamic, a cast that got along incredibly. And Martin is the same thing, except it's kind of a knockoff of Seinfeld, right? One guy's a radio host, one guy's a comedian. It's named Martin, it's named Seinfeld. They've got quirky friends. Martin's got a quirky bald friend, that's the voice of reason. Jerry's got a quirky bald friend, that's the voice of reason. Martin has a crazy friend that comes in through the window. Jerry has a crazy friend that slides in through the door. They both have a female partner that they date that is their intellectual equal. Hey, come on, Gina. Elaine's got the crazy kicks. I mean, think about it. Elaine went on to be president of the United States of America, for crying out loud. How can Seinfeld not be number one? I'm sure this list is going to ruffle a lot of feathers. Now, when you go back, I didn't mention Third Rock from the Sun. I didn't mention Blossom. I didn't mention Boy Meets World. Go back and think about all of the great television in the 1990s. It really was a heyday. Now we got Netflix. Hopefully it's coming back. But I got to tell you, looking back on it, the 1990s, television was amazing. They were putting out hit after hit after hit after hit. I didn't talk about Full House. I didn't talk about Family Matters. I didn't talk about Hanging with Mr. Cooper. How great was Hanging with Mr. Cooper? There was so much great TV back in the 90s. But these are my top 7. If you disagree, leave a comment down below. You don't like this. Martin's not the black Seinfeld. You're a racist. I can't wait for the comments. I just like comedy, man. There's great television. I said your show's great, but because I put it at 5 instead of 3, they're like, oh, you're so fat, mix in a salad. What does that have to do with, what? It's a list, man.
You're not wrong, but that's irrelevant.
Yeah, right? Like, yeah, of course I am fat, but I mean, I could not be. I choose to